Welcome to the Three Wise Men of Divorce, Money, Psych, and Law podcast. Sit down with the California divorce experts, financial divorce consultant Mark Hill, psychologist Scott Weiner, and attorney Shawn Weber for a frank and casual conversation about divorce, separation, co-parenting, and the difficult decisions real people like you face during these tough times. We know that if you are looking at divorce or separation, it can be scary and overwhelming. With combined experience of over 70 years in divorce and conflict management, we are here for you and look forward to helping by sharing our unique ideas, thoughts, and perspectives on divorce, separation, and co-parenting. So, gentlemen, it's that most wonderful time of the year.
Oh my.
When the malls are full and there's holiday music that you can't escape.
And the pocketbooks are empty.
And the pocketbooks start emptying.
And the masks are in many colors.
Yeah. Actually, the stores aren't full.
That's
Did you
right.
notice that? I know, Mark, you're the finance guy, but I understand that the retail shopping's down quite a bit right now.
Oh.
Yeah, it's all moved
At least in the
online.
brick and mortar, right?
Yeah.
It's all online.
Yeah.
I just drove back from Colorado in the last day and a half, and boy,
How
did
was
I
that?
see a lot of Amazon trucks on the highway.
Oh,
Yeah.
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 They let you back in?
You're
Yeah.
quarantined, right? You're not leaving the home for 14 days.
They didn't even slow me down at the border for being a vegetable after having driven that far.
So you smuggled your fruit in, huh?
Yeah, all of it. See, all the gourd here.
You know, when we get into this season, at least as a family law attorney, my phone stops ringing for new cases because people don't want to start a divorce right in the middle of the holiday. Although it does happen. Usually my phone starts ringing because people are upset about something
what?
that's going on
And why
with the
ever
holiday
would that
celebration.
be, Shawn?
You know, this may come as a surprise to you, but holidays are filled with emotions.
Mm.
I just don't know what you're talking about.
People have these traditions, and it's hard enough when you're still married, but when you're recently divorced or in the process of divorcing, you're watching your family traditions have to get reshaped, and that's very uncomfortable. And people sometimes react badly, and sometimes it's legitimately hard. And I'm not saying this to say that people are doing anything wrong. I mean, it's some people are, but it's legitimately hard to realign your holiday traditions.
And if you're in the middle of a divorce, what you're going to do this year is probably not what you're going to do next year and the year after. So there's a certain amount of uncertainty that also is accompanying that. And the in-laws can be the problem. What's going to happen? That question can be challenging.
And there's one moment in every mediation where I know there's going to be tears. Just about every single one of them, even the ones where they're really getting along well. And that's when the parties contemplate the reality that one of them is going to be away from the kids for the holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What, you mean I'm not going to be with my kids on Christmas this year or whatever holiday you celebrate?
Mm-hmm.
And that's tears will flow. And there's a really good reason for that, right? I mean, these holidays are important. This is, I'll be home for Christmas. There's all those songs out there. They're all about there's no place like home for the holidays.
Yep.
But we've now taken this kind of dream that we've had when we got married. I was called the Griswold dream. How Griswold in Christmas Story always had this kind of idealized view of what Christmas was, even though it was probably not in reality like that for him, but he wanted that Norman Rockwell moment.
Yep.
And then couldn't have it. And I think that happens to folks when they're going through a divorce.
Well, I think of the times that we tell them, and we say to ourselves even that, it's not like your family won't exist. It's just going to change form. And when you're doing something like this, it really does feel like two families now.
Right.
and two households and two thises and two that's. And often the generations, the parents, the in-laws are at war or joining sides with the war.
So there's a couple of questions that have to be answered then, that have to be addressed when you're planning. And we really do think you should plan for the holidays post-divorce.
Oh, yes.
One is, how are you handling gift giving and the spending therefore for the gift giving? What is the schedule? When are the kids going to be at which house? And what are we going to do about the in-laws? For me, those are the big three. Are there other questions we should be thinking about, guys? I mean, there probably are, but
where we actually began this discussion earlier, as we're talking or contemplating this subject, some of the behavior that these we can't really call them litigants in our universe because they're really not litigating, but they are in the midst of, could we coin a new word? We can call them these mediants. Would that work?
Well, they're participating in a negotiation, but I mean, I am a big believer that my job is to manage conflict. I don't have cases that are devoid of conflict.
We can't do that.
But so they're going to have conflict. So they're in conflict.
Okay.
And then what are they going to do then about the holidays? And sometimes people do things deliberately, and sometimes just little things can set people off. But Mark, you had a story.
Yes, he did.
I've got a couple. In fact, I'm going to start with one that
I wrote a
you
song.
haven't heard yet, I don't believe. When my wife and I divorced, Christmas became an issue. But then we sat down and we talked about it, and we realized we had no issue because her family always celebrated on Christmas Eve and opened presents before they went to bed. And my family did it in the morning. So my son would spend Christmas Eve often going down to his grandparents' place and celebrating Christmas there, would go home with his mom, sleep at his mom's house on Christmas Eve, and come to me the following morning and spend Christmas Day with me. So, but we could have had a fight about that if we hadn't thought about it and how both families celebrated
that's good,
things.
And that works
so
out.
Just having a conversation, nice. We realized we didn't have an issue.
So Mark, was your ritual Boxing Day?
No, Boxing Day was kind of a time to lay on the couch, eat too much, and watch what you would call soccer. Yeah.
I thought Boxing Day is Christmas Day, or is it the day after Christmas?
It's the day after.
I see. 26.
Here's a little anecdote. Nobody knows quite where it came from, but it was the one day a year in the 16 and 1700s when apprentices didn't have to work. And the carpenter's apprentices would make little boxes out of wood and go around and ask for alms, ask for donations from the passers-by. That's where the concept of basket, there's the one day a year they didn't have to work.
I thought it was you had so many boxes.
You would think, wouldn't you? Yeah, no.
Or you had to put all of your Christmas decorations in a box.
Yeah.
In case any of our listeners haven't realized this by now, Mark is a Brit. Oh my Lord.
And we still like him.
Well,
I have a special relationship with him.
I think so. I don't know. I think this past year we've proven that our existence as a colony is perhaps.
Yeah. No, you can't come back. I'm sorry. You're too.
Please.
We don't want you. Thank you.
But we don't want to go back.
Oh yes,
are you sure?
No.
Yeah, what a queen! I know.
I mean, you guys have the Stones and the Beatles and stuff. But...
Yeah, but you don't pledge allegiance to them. So, but the story you were talking about before that I shared when we were chatting before we came live was the hunting rifle story.
Yep.
Where the father bought a hunting rifle for, I think, 12 or 13-year-old son. And the wife was incredibly anti-weapons, anti-guns. And he used it sort of as I think he was turning the knife, frankly. I think he was sticking the knife in and turning it, because his response was, well, but you wanted me to spend more time with him and bond with him, and we can now go hunting together. Not what the wife had in mind. She was furious and felt absolutely manipulated by this. So how do you deal with something like that, where somebody's actually, and I think he was getting at her. I think he was,
Well, Shawn already suggested a strategy, but it would have had to have been a preloaded strategy for something like that.
Interesting choice of terms there, sir.
Which one?
Preloaded.
Preloading, yes. Front loading is actually, I doubt that this hunting rifle was a
front loader. No.
Yeah, that those muskets went out.
Really, just pump that thing. Yeah.
Anyway, what Shawn had said earlier, Shawn, you said something about to really plan and really negotiate out in advance what you're going to do. I mean, Mark's story is, I'm a therapist, right? I mean, this reeks of bad faith, I mean, it's really hard. It's really hard for me to imagine a dad doing something like that and not knowing that he was twisting the bayonet, as it were, on the end, on that rifle. I mean,
he knew very well.
But he had deniability. His concept was he had
all on the spectrum, really seriously. They'd have no sense of the emotional import of what they were doing.
Oh, this guy was aware of what he was doing.
He knew darn well what he was doing.
He was kind of smug. He was kind of trying not to grin,
Look what I did.
I did what you told me, and now you're mad at me. I can't win, can I?
Well, but I do think, Scott, though, that there are a lot of people that don't realize how boneheaded their purchasing decision was. Like the case I had years ago, where the guy comes home. They had a plan where for that year the kids would wake up at mom's house for Christmas, and Santa Claus will have left things under the tree, and then he shows up at 10 o'clock to pick them up. And, she's giving them very serviceable items like socks and underwear and books. And because that's how they did when they were married. They tried to kind of not go crazy with Christmas. And then he shows up with an Xbox, and didn't talk to her about it. And if you've had kids with an Xbox, that is a commitment.
And it's the last time you see them for about 2 years, as I recall.
Right. It's a commitment. I mean, she was very upset because she didn't talk to him about this. And he just kind of on his own did this, announced it. And the intention on his side was that it was going to be at her house. Like, it wasn't even, well, I'll have the Xbox at my house. And when it's my parenting, he thought, we'll just set it up here because the kids are here more.
So in that case,
and it was just not very thoughtful, but
right. But in that case, if you have a conversation about it first, you can diffuse it. If there's no intent, I think the hunting rifle would have happened under any circumstance.
Yeah, he was just being a jerk. But if you're not trying to be a jerk, and then you have a conversation, you say, "Oh, I'm going to get an Xbox," and wife's like, "Well, hold on, I don't know that I want to have an Xbox." Now we can have a dialogue.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's really where people get into trouble, is not talking. And it's about everything in divorce. When you don't talk as co-parents, you're just asking for trouble.
And that ties into the money. That ties into the different circumstances that people can find themselves in after divorce. We've all had clients who have inheritances that the one side gets to enjoy and the other side doesn't, that changes financial circumstances, and one side may not be able to participate to the same level. So it's just another sort of extension of what we call the Disneyland dad concept. He just shows up on the weekends, has fun with the kids, spends a bunch of money, and then goes back to work and sends them back to mom for, getting their laundry done and getting off to school.
The other thing I've seen is one of the parents buys the kids an iPhone. Mm-hmm. And usually when that happens, there's an agenda there. That is because the out parent usually is the person that buys the iPhone, feels like they're not able to communicate with their child when in the other person's care. And so they think, if I get an iPhone and I pay for this thing, I'm going to have, access to my kid whenever I want. And
which again can be problematic.
It can be problematic. And why could it be problematic?
Well, Scott, tell us why that could be an issue. Let me count the ways.
We don't have that long. Well, most plainly, when we talk about a custodial arrangement, the major influence and the major time being spent is to be with that custodial parent. Now, this has a backhanded twist in it, which, Shawn brought it up as, that is sometimes laden with the agenda of wanting to be able to talk to that child. I've seen this happen when really almost as a response to the fact that there really wasn't adequate support of ongoing communication with the other parent. Again, each one of these situations, as we're bringing them up, in one, I mean, we can imagine a context in which a dad could buy a son or a daughter a hunting rifle and actually have that be okay if it really had been talked through. If that dad had really accentuated with mom, even though divorced, that here's how I'd like to do it. Here's the training I'm going to include. Here's the this, here's the that, here's the safety. And by the way, if you want to come, I want you to come too, so you can see it in person yourself.
That's very different than the kids showing up
of rogues going to shoot up the neighborhood. This is a controlled circumstance, blah blah blah.
Yeah. So it was the surprise to some degree of the son walking in with his brand new, rifle, and mom's AK. Like, it wasn't an AK-47, but it was a hunting rifle, so it's a big weapon,
Well, these are, when these problems happen, I feel like they're symptomatic of a bigger problem. It's not that he bought an iPhone or that he bought a rifle.
Exactly.
There was an underlying problem that got him to the place where they're not communicating about basic things like what's going to happen at Christmas.
And the reason they do that is because they can't communicate well together because everything ends up in a fight. So they tend not to talk about these critical things. So if there is any benefit to what we do is providing facilitation for these difficult conversations so that these flashpoints can be basically prevented from occurring ahead of time.
Well, I was going to say, the good stories I've had, I had a couple for several years. They would mediate with me exactly what was going to go down with Christmas every year, and they would come in and I would facilitate this conversation and we would write it up. This is our agreement. It wasn't like we were filing court orders and stuff like that, but it was important to them to be able to have a facilitated conversation about this because they recognized that it was hard for them.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason why they got divorced. It wasn't because they got along. And I think being able to be humble about it enough to be able to say, okay, I need some help here. Why don't we go in here and do this right so that we don't ruin Christmas every time? Because I've heard a lot, I've talked to kids that have, we always talk about what divorce story do you want your kids to tell? And I've had kids tell me the divorce story of, oh my gosh, we dreaded the holidays.
Yep.
Because we knew it was going to be a fight and we were going to be in the middle of it and it ruined Christmas every year or it ruined whatever birthday or holiday they had every year. And so it's also very important, I think, for folks to really, really step back and think about it. These emotions that you're having. Are they for the benefit of your children or are they for your own benefit?
And that second phrase, it isn't a genuine benefit.
No.
I think almost always it's a form of paybacks or a form of, vengeful behavior that
I hear this a lot. We want to do this for the kids. This is in the best interest of the children. And I always have people step back and really think it really hard. This demand that you're making, is it really for the best interest of the children or is this for something that is important to you? And 9 times out of 10, it's more important to the parent than it ever was to the kid.
Well, sure. I mean, they'll come up with a rationale. I will ask them, please tell me how this helps your child. Please tell me.
Very good. Yeah.
And trying as hard as I can to be kind to them who are having this challenge simply because they're getting divorced. They're having a rough go,
And I encourage people to be inquisitive about outcome. In other words,
like a true finance guy. Yeah.
Well, just, what do you expect to come from this? What's your hope that by this behavior or this action or what you're planning on doing, what do you hope it will achieve? And that usually gives pause for a little thought and a little silence, because you're not thinking about outcome. You're thinking about action. You're thinking about, well, I could do this, and it may be revenge. It could be just really unaware of what might happen because you haven't thought about outcome.
Okay. So
we
agree.
That takes it very nicely out of the I'm acting out my feelings into what is this going to actually create?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it does it in a very peaceable way too. He might have a future as a therapist, this Brit over here. I don't know. What do you think?
He might.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we agree that it's important to talk about the gift giving and what's going to happen at the holidays. Communication. It's a key point. Okay. But what about just some basic logistics? Like for folks that may be new at this, I'm always kind of telling people, like, when you got the Christmas thing, if that's the holiday you celebrate, what matters most to the parents, in my experience, I know it's different for you, Mark, because you guys had different traditions, but what matters to most people is, where is the kid going to wake up?
Yeah.
Because of Santa coming.
Yep.
Santa Claus.
Yep.
And so usually what we see is a kind of an alternating schedule where in even years, the kids will be with mom on Christmas Eve until 10 a.m. on Christmas Day, and then with dad for Christmas Day until 10 a.m. the next day. And then the following year, in odd years, it switches.
And you might offset it with Thanksgiving.
That's
going
right.
To the other way, so there's some balance each year.
And so it switches. And one person's going to get the wake up time. But if you guys can pull it off and put the kids first, you could actually arrange it so that when that 10 o'clock exchange time happens, maybe you come at 9 o'clock and you guys do the present things together. Imagine that. Yeah. And just maybe stop with the anger long enough for the kids to have a nice Christmas. You could do that. And then New Year's, you would do a similar kind of a thing, kind of an even odd thing. And maybe you would offset the one for the other. Another thing that people do is they just look at the Christmas break and they just say first half with one person and the second half with the other person. That's another way to do it, depending on what your circumstances.
All of these strategies, from sitting in my office and I'm listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, this Shawn Weber, he sounds so reasonable. And that is exactly how these people are not feeling,
Mm-hmm. And wait a minute, you're telling me that my kid's not going to wake up with me every Christmas? What?
Yeah, exactly. And
that's a legitimate, you're feeling, okay, now I'm going to talk like the therapist. You tell me if I got it right, Scott, but you're feeling the grief of the loss of that holiday tradition, the way you dreamt it would be. When you say that's true?
Not only is that true, but the reason that it is being disturbed is because of this horrible excrescence of a human being that you managed to errantly marry. The only good thing having happened is that you had these children in the first place. And
right. But I'll be darned if I'm going to have my Christmas ruined by his mother.
Yeah. Oh. So the way I've handled that in the past is I ask a question. So how did you think Christmas was going to work after the divorce?
They don't think that far.
Oh, yeah.
What?
Right. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Didn't think that far through.
Just asking that question takes you away from I must have this Christmas, otherwise the world's going to end.
I like this consequential thinking from this financial guy.
Yeah. Well, it's the if-then statement. I always take people to an if-then statement. Yeah. If you guys can get along on Christmas, then your children will be happier. When you behave like adults over this holiday, then your children will not be exposed to your conflict, and that'll be good for them. That kind of thing. Consequences really matter here. There's natural consequences. What else helps is at the beginning of a case is really identifying governing values. I call them the big rocks. We've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've never had people say, well, we really want to make sure that we ruin our children's holidays every year. Nobody ever says that. They usually say, we agree that both parties are important to the children, that the children need both parents. Usually that's what happens, unless you've got a terrorist that you're married to. That's usually what people are saying.
I would like to accentuate for anyone listening to this that what Shawn just said at the beginning, we try to, label some values, sort of the mission of what we're really trying to do.
Yeah.
When you litigate, that meeting never happens.
No, it doesn't. No.
That's when you hire warriors to purportedly maximize the achievement of winnings on your side and essentially share 1/3 of your estate in order to have a war.
Yep. It's a win-lose approach.
I don't want to pretend there aren't times, and nobody here would pretend that there aren't times when, this is not a mediation. No chance.
Well, and even when it's a mediation, you may have very good reasons for why you don't want the kids to spend Christmas night with the other parent. You may have very good rational reasons for why that is. And so then how do you address that when you're in a negotiation? Like maybe, I really don't want him to have the kids overnight because of the drinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you have that? How do you have a rational conversation about very difficult concerns like that?
You have it facilitated, number one.
Yes.
Because
Amen. Yeah.
What people have shown in this process is that they can't have this conversation together. Otherwise, they wouldn't be getting a divorce, probably.
Well, and then when I'm facilitating, I always have them take a step back.
Take a step back.
Yep.
And then another question, which is a question about the possibilities can be posed, which is, well, under what circumstances, Mrs. Johnson, would that not be a problem for you? Well,
Mm-hmm.
if you're wondering, well, okay, what would that take? What would that take? And, there's enough professional skill, like in this particular group and in many other groups of mediators, where, if it's a sobriety issue, we can help that person get started down that road. If they're willing to do something like that. And if they say, it's none of your goddamn business, well.
So
another
thing we could do is kind of take the whiteboard out and just throw up suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, and I often would start with a really dumb one because you want them to be
free
exploring things. So I will say, well, my suggestion is you both spend Christmas in your separate home and the kids are going to go with the dog. How's that for a suggestion? Now it's dumb and it's stupid, but we're going to write it up there because there are no stupid.
Yeah, you're brainstorming.
We're brainstorming, exactly. So, and then people start to think creatively, and you've given them permission not to be accused of their idea being stupid because my idea was the stupidest and I put it up first.
Right.
That it is good to establish that kind of freedom if you're going to brainstorm. I think that the circumstance we're talking about, though, is when there's the 600-pound whatever in the room, which is an insurmountable. Unless Fred is sober, I don't want the kids over there. And really,
it's hard to brainstorm around something as
you could ask.
It can be done. It can be done. It can be done. Uncle or Fred, may engage in a doctor-mediated program of anti-abuse, for instance. Fred may do this. Fred may get involved in a group and have his sponsor there. Fred may. I mean,
or you might do like
ways.
like the sober link, where you blow into a device and it
yes,
sends a message to the other parent.
There's that.
A lot of times I'll ask that woman in that situation, well, do you believe, I get it that you're worried about him being alone with the kids when he's intoxicated. That not exposing the children to intoxication is important to you, correct? Yes. Okay. So is there a way that he can have some time on Christmas and see them on Christmas where you'll feel safe about it? There's that question, the one you just asked. And the other is, like, how important do you think it is for the children to see him on Christmas?
Right. Yeah.
Or whatever the holiday is, right? How important do you think it is for them to see him? And again, just kind of bringing it back to them and focusing it on what's really important here, which is the kids' needs. And maybe it isn't, and I've had a lot of these cases where, I mean, they're heartbreaking, but really isn't appropriate for there to be an overnight with a particular parent.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can plan for what is a way that we can make this work so that the kids get to see their dad or their mom on an important day.
And then sometimes it is the case, not always, but sometimes, because we are neutrals, and because, I mean, if we can't make it clear to all of these parents, regardless of what their problems are, that we're trying to help them, then we're losing too. But oftentimes we can start people, we can't do the work for them, but we can start them down a path of, it's not unreasonable for her to be concerned about that, but that's not all there is to you. You are this human being, and that's a problem. Let's solve that problem so that can, you don't want that in your life anyway. I mean, the problem that it brings you, maybe you want the comfort of it, but there's other ways to get comfort. We can get people started in a direction where that mom won't be worried anymore. We can help them start.
That raises something that just suddenly occurred to me. I mean, I don't want to talk about it. I don't have a drinking problem. I drink, I fall down, I get up next morning, I'm fine. What's the problem? And so one of the challenges in a way in mediation is that it's hard to hide. You can hide in litigation. I'm not talking to her. My attorney's going to handle everything. I'm just going to go off over here on my merry way and do what the hell I want, and the divorce will work itself out.
I'm tired of her interfering with my freedom.
Exactly.
You always did that during the marriage. That's why I'm leaving you.
You drove me to
other
drink.
Woman, is because you were such a difficult person, and now you're still doing it. You always accused me of drinking too much. The only reason I ever drank was because you were so hard to live with.
Yep.
We hear that, right?
Yeah. Oh boy, do we hear that.
But I mean, one of the things that's nice about having a mediated forum is that you can have these difficult conversations in a safe environment. And
in order to complete a mediation, is you have to be accountable as an individual. You can't abrogate your responsibilities to the process. You have to be engaged in it.
Well, one of the ways I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, and that can be scary to people sometimes.
Yeah.
Because they feel, well, I won't have the resources. He always beats me up in meetings. I can't handle him. So having a strong neutral in place who will make sure the ground rules are followed, make sure everyone feels protected and safe. It's really creating a safe container to have this most difficult conversation.
Well, there's that, a lot of times what I'll go to the person that has the problem or allegedly has the problem. Maybe he doesn't have a problem, or she. I'm like, what do you think you can do to show the other person that it's safe? Do you have any ideas for how you can build trust? Sounds like she doesn't trust you. Is there a way you could build trust with that person? What ideas do you have? And they'll come up with ideas. It's impressive.
Yep. But you're changing it from an accusation to a problem to be solved.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah.
That's the skill in that question, Shawn.
And that's hard to do when you're the person, to think that way, but it really is.
Yeah.
skill when you're trying to get along. And like, I want people to be able to get along after I'm done with them. You know, they're done paying my bill, and now I'd like them to not have to ever call me again.
Yeah.
Even though I love repeat business. I'd love for them not to have to call me back again, because they've developed some new muscles. They've built some new muscles and new skills, and they know how to talk to each other. And one way is how to raise concerns without being accusatory and nasty, and how to hear those concerns. You know, well, all right. So, you know, when I was first married, it was hard enough to figure out where we were going to go for Christmas with the in-laws.
Yeah.
And one thing I've learned, you know, even when it seems like during the marriage you get along great with your in-laws, when the divorce happens, one concept that holds true forever, and that is that blood is thicker than water. And the family circles the wagons around their own person, and that's just human nature. So how do you handle, maybe you and the other person have reached agreements for how you're going to behave for the holidays, but what do you do when the in-laws, when the extended family are not behaving or are making this challenging?
This brings up an interesting feature that I frankly had never thought of before. And boy, we think about a lot of things. But you know, when we talk about our mission at the beginning, often of a mediation, incorporating extended family into the mission notion is something that I hadn't thought of before as an explicit item to say. Now, you know, you two are actually working to have a different kind of solution from a litigated war. You know, what are you willing to do to extend this kind of a peaceful resolution, or this kind of a resolution, to the extended family, for the sake of yourselves and for the children too, so they don't have to be part of a quiet, ongoing, you know, shifting sands kind of war, you know?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of concepts. One is, number one, establish that you're the parents, not these grandparents. You're the parents. And so you two make decisions. That's the first paradigm. And the second paradigm is, you know, if there is somebody that is an influencer in the family, you can bring them to the mediation.
True.
Assuming everybody agrees that person should come. And have them participate in the mission statement. Maybe this family system that you're in extends beyond just the two of you. So how can you make sure that decision makers, people that have influence over what happens at the holidays, are part of this discussion?
It's interesting, but your first premise about the parents being the parents, so to speak, mediates in a way against that. On the other hand, I would want, and this, I'm glad this came up in our little discussion. I would be thinking about this going forward.
I mean, that could be a whole show. Like, how do you deal with extended family?
I want this to be included as an explicit intent by the part of the parents, that they will, you know, tell their parents that, listen, we're doing this peacefully. We mean to do this peacefully for the sake of the children. You know, I don't want you to hate him. That's not your job.
Yeah, and I've seen that happen.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, in a way, what you get from your extended family in divorce when those wagons get circled is people who want to help you. They want to save you. They want you to be okay. They're worried for you.
Yeah.
So if you go to these people and say, you know what, this is how you can help me. This is what you could do for me that would be really helpful. You could be really flexible around the holidays this year. That would really help me. And now what you've done is you've created a positive out of a potential negative, where they would, you know, go in as your champion with their sword drawn, you know.
Well, and here's my advice to the grandparents. You want to make sure you don't see your grandchild when they're with the other parent. You make an enemy out of the other parent.
Yeah.
If you want there to be flexibility and you want to have more time with your grandchildren, then you better do everything you can to make sure that the other parent feels supported as well.
Yep.
Because otherwise, if you set this up as a war between you and the other parent, you've already lost. Because the other parent will win. I mean, at court, at least in the state of California, there's not really grandparents' rights, really.
Not at all.
It's only if your kids, your child who had these children can't, and the other parent can't care for the kids, do grandparents' rights even have anything? And so if you want to have grandparents' rights, you want to have time with your grandchildren, don't alienate the other parent.
So takeaways from this are, if you're going to buy an AR-15, be sure that you clear it with your husband, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's number one.
There's no time like home for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Or no place like home. Is that how it goes?
I don't know. I don't know that one.
There's no place like home for the holidays?
Yeah, it's a place.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was, I have a little rifle. No.
Grandma got run over by a reindeer. Are we going to go down that road?
I know that I have clients that almost would wish that would happen, but let's not go there. Let's not go there. But I mean, I think actually, let's end it on a happy note. Holidays can be beautiful and they can be a wonderful family time, even after a divorce. Like I think you said at the beginning, Scott, just because you're getting divorced does not mean your family is ending. It just means that the roles of the parents are switching around a little bit. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And you can have Christmas and Hanukkah and whatever you celebrate after divorce.
And I'll close with a story from my son when he was about 7 years old. And he was 2 or 3 when his mother and I separated. Right after Christmas, he comes to me, or we're driving in the car, I think, and he says, Dad, I kind of feel sorry for kids whose parents aren't divorced. I looked at him, I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, they only get one Christmas. So that was his perception of it. So we were able to do it right and had him perceive it as a positive.
It's like that
a little
Jason
bit self-serving
Mraz song about For the Love of a Child, and he's like, I always loved both my Christmases and my birthday cakes.
Right.
That is true. I have never known a kid that was upset that there were 2 Christmases.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So,
okay, guys.
I think we've done another session for the wise men.
I think so.
I think we have.
I actually enjoyed this conversation. There's a lot there.
It was interesting. There, right? And actually, I think we've got some themes we can explore in future episodes. But also, I want to encourage listeners to send in any questions or things they'd like to have us ruminate about. We'd love to have your topics.
We do read that. We appreciate it. So, Scott, if people needed to get a hold of you so they could figure out how they're going to get along during the holidays,
if they would like to contact me, they would call me, and I actually answer my own phone. My name is Scott Weiner, and I am a psychologist and inactive attorney, but a law trained as well. And I am at 619-417-5743 in Solana Beach, California. Mark.
They've got to figure out how to pay for their Christmas.
Yeah. So I'm a financial guy. I work exclusively in alternative dispute resolution, and my company is Pacific Divorce Management. We're in Sorrento Valley, and you would go to my website to contact me, pacdivorce.com, PACDIVORCE.com.
And if you need to resolve your dispute, call our office by going to WeberDisputeResolution.com. That's Weber Dispute Resolution, Weber with 1B.com. And we will match you with a mediator who can help you have a difficult conversation and get through your dispute.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the 3 Wise Men of Divorce: Money, Psych, and Law. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share with others who may be in a similar place. Until next time, stay safe
healthy, and focused on a positive, bright future. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Every family law case is unique, so no legal, financial, or mental health advice is intended during this podcast. If you need help with your specific situation, feel free to schedule a time to speak with one of us for a personal consultation.